So here we are for another episode of Words with Friends. And today I'm here with my good friend Scott Stratten. And being as I've been at home for 5 days, I'm trying to envy him on the beard front and failing miserably. Scott, welcome.
Dude, that's how this beard came about. I was home for a summer and literally forgot to look in the mirror. And then it just grew. And I looked at the end in the fall, I went, that's not bad.
I think if I stayed at home for the whole summer with this, it would look just about like this. I think I think that's where it would get to. It kind of gets to here in about 5 days and then never changes. It just gets progressively itchier.
Our double word of the day is facial hair.
That's 2 words.
That's why I said double word of the day.
Okay. Well, that's not the word we're going to talk about because that would be a pretty boring episode. And it's not even the receding hairline you just pointed to. What we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the word speaking. So, Scott, in your mind, what does the word speaking mean?
Speaking for me, since I am a speaker, is about storytelling and being on stage.
Okay. Now, it's this aspirational career for many right now. If I look across on social media or see anybody's like a run of Facebook ads, etc., there seems to be this desire to want to be a speaker or involved in the speaking profession right now. Why do you think it's such a sexy thing?
Well, I think because it looks easy. If you get past, if you can get on stage, if you've done it yourself, and you're like, it's one of the things I hear, and I'm sure you do too, when you get off stage sometimes, you've just delivered a talk for a few hundred or a few thousand people, and somebody says, yeah, I speak too. I just did a meeting at work yesterday with 5 people, and they're like, what they're saying is, I could do this too, and so it's an interesting thing to me where people, because it really is, I speak for an hour and that's it. I get paid to do that, and there's travel and there's hotels and there's all that type of stuff, but my job is on stage for an hour. And so people like the thought of that. They don't realize the path to that or what it takes to do that or the craft of it, but they're like, yeah, that is a better idea than 8 to 12 hours a day, 5-6 days a week for 40 years. And you're right, it is much more enjoyable.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is way more enjoyable, hence why I guess the pair of us now use it as a career choice.
Right.
And I find it crazy ironic, though, that people think about this as an easier option. They want to jump on the bandwagon to find the silver bullet towards that easy option. Yet still there's this mass of people that think of speaking to an audience as the most petrifying thing on the planet.
It's a quite a contrast. And I think one of the reasons why I think that you and I can do it for a living is, one thing is that most people don't want to do it, so it creates scarcity. And then there's a fraction of people who want to do it but don't necessarily have the skill set or the background or something to then bring in front of the stage. Speaking for me is, you have something to say that people want to hear. You have the right to say it because of the experience you have, and people are willing, that you're so good to pay you for it. Like, that's really the equation for it. And I think when you put all those factors together, it leaves you with a fairly small pool of people comparatively to the population size. So the fear of it is what I don't have. And the thing is, though, it's not a confidence thing. It's not a skill thing. I'm missing a synapse in my brain that says, wet your pants before you go on stage. I have you can hook me up to a heart monitor and there's no blip. I might be flatlining before I go on stage. Like, that is my most calm in my life before. And I am a professional relaxer. Like, I can do nothing. I can sit in this chair right here, right now, all day, but I am most calm right before I walk on stage, which is funny because I'm a very animated kind of energetic speaker, but it's not a skill set for me. It's just natural.
Okay. Have you always been like that?
Always
Yeah.
From grade school, that's how I graduated high school. That's how I graduated college, actually, is that, any class that had a mark of 30% of the mark was a presentation, I knew I'm good. So I could get a D on the midterm and a D on the final and ace the presentation, and I'm good to go. It was always my thing. And the thing was noticing that, was realizing that was my talent. And then that was my unique skill comparatively to the majority. There's other people who could present in my classes and do that as well. They did a huge amount of prep and rehearsal. I've never rehearsed a talk in my life. And that's not a good thing, by the way. I'm not advising people to do that. I don't say wing it, for everybody. But I realized that was my skill set early on. Like I wanted to be a speaker on stage since I was 12. Most 12-year-olds wanted to be a firefighter or a police officer or a doctor, and I wanted to be a speaker because I saw Les Brown on TV doing a motivational talk, and I'm like, oh, whoa, that's a thing. And I knew, and it sounds cheesy now, and it works so well for me now, but it was 12 years old. I remember where I was sitting in my childhood home, and I'm like, that's what I want to do, and that's what I do. So
you now are Les Brown.
I am in one way or another.
Okay.
Fast forward 20 years, and I spoke at his event. I spoke at Les Brown's event in Orlando. So talk about a full circle, crazy thing. And he's still going. It's amazing.
It is awesome. And I think that's the beautiful thing with it as a career choice is it can run for as long as you have air in your lungs, right? It right. Really does have that power to stay relevant. I want to touch on something you just said a second ago that really intrigued me is when you go and you look at your high school or your college results, a significant percentage of the grade was placed on your ability to be able to speak, your ability to be able to present an idea or get people to come around with a way of thinking in group environments. That's like a real thing though, right? Because that actually equates into real life too, is that your ability to be able to influence from the front of a room of people, whether you're being paid for it or not, is a skill that perhaps should be higher rated as we step out of kind of college kind of environments too. So what are some of the things that people could do to maybe get past that fear point and maybe just have themselves being more comfortable like you are of addressing a room full of strangers towards an outward purpose?
It's a great point because it should be taught a lot more where it always benefits you to be able to stand up in front of people. Again, that could be 5 people. And to get up, even presentation skills, you can be sitting down for. The ability to captivate somebody with your ability to speak is always an asset. It shows people will follow leaders in workplaces that have no business being a leader if orate well in front of a room. And to the point where I actually ended up teaching at the college I went to. And one of the courses I taught was business communications. So I taught first-year students how to speak. And talk about nerves. And the majority of them would be just freaking out. And the curriculum said they had to present on a business communications topic, like how to write a memo and email etiquette. And I threw it all out. And I said, I want you all to pick one topic that you love. I don't care if it's Xbox. I don't care if it's Ferraris. I don't care if it's Desperate Housewives, the show, Lord of the Rings. Pick a topic you love. And I want you to speak about it for 5 minutes. And we helped structure it, and they got up. And every single student that talked, 42 students a class, 3 classes in that semester, gave a talk. And after they were finished, still standing up front, everybody in the room, fellow students, gave a thought of what they did well and what they could work on for the second one, because there was 2 presentations that semester. And your mark was based on simply this: not that you were an A presenter, not that you knocked it out of the park, is that your second talk needed to be better than your first talk.
Love it.
That was it. And so when they talked about something they loved, they changed because they knew the subject. And that's what did a difference. But that's what snuck in the lesson about, studying your topic rehearsal, even though I didn't do it. The more you know your topic, the less nervous they would. So they learned that through just by default. I love when people learn without realizing they're learning. And so when you then throw them and say, talk to me about how to write a memo, you just trip up and you wouldn't be able to do it, nor were you into it. And that's how you get the lessons of presenting in there. So one of the things I taught the students was realize the biggest thing is this is the biggest contradicting in presenting, is that it's not about you.
Right.
Which is such a contradiction, right? Because
it's
you
huge.
are the main focal point of everybody's attention. And the point is that it's about what you're telling them. It's about the content. And if you make that your focus, you do get less nervous. And the second tip I gave them was nobody is hoping you fail.
Yeah, that's
right?
great.
And nobody cares if you do. You just keep going. And I give an example. You only will make a mistake a focal point if you make it the focal point. And you just keep going. Where I remember when what happens is if something goes wrong and the slide doesn't come up. And the biggest mistake I see some presenters make now is like, we had a video to play now, but it wasn't working. So we're not playing it. And I'm like, and the whole audience had no idea there was supposed to be a video in the first place. And now they're like, well, no matter how good this is, what was the video? Right? And they're all just on top of that.
Yeah,
so,
I'm missing the video, man.
Right. I don't even know what it was. It could have been terrible. And one of the side things I noted was everybody has a tell. Right? So in poker, you have a tell. Everybody has a tell when they know they're reaching for something. And that's usually an or a like, or it's those filler sounds, right, between pauses. And I became a much better speaker when I embraced the pause. That it's okay not to have just filled with words all the time. And so what we did was I ticked off people's tells while they were speaking. So when somebody stopped their 5-minute talk, I'd ask the class, how many ums do you think they said? And people were like 5 or 4, and I'm like 14. And when you consciously can recognize you're doing something, then you could say, okay, well, I can stop myself from doing it. And that's why I always advise people who are actual speakers from stage and stuff is to watch themselves on video. It's mostly really hard. It's just like,
it sucks.
Right? I love watching myself on stage, but most people don't. But I can watch here's what I did. So I'm a speaker, right? I was born to do this because I do this for a living. 10 years ago, I watched a video of myself and I had no idea I was doing this. I was wiping my nose for no reason. It was just a habit I had on stage. I didn't have nerves. I wasn't doing it as a tick. I was just doing it because it was my comfort. And I would do this and it would cover my mouth. And so it would change the sound of my voice, even if I could get away with that, which was not, it looks like I'm on coke. Like, I got to stop doing that. So when you do that, I watched it and said, I've got to stop that. So I realized I put my hands down.
I do a thing as well, which is I'll record the audio of a lot of speeches. Certainly did this in a lot of early days, and then transcribe them and then read them back. And what was also interesting with the transcription, particularly when you push it out to a transcription service, is when you get the parts that they say inaudible.
Yes.
And you're like, I need to slow the frick down here, or I need to announce my words better there. Or like, hold on, that was somebody who was paid to understand what I was saying and still couldn't understand what I was saying.
Professional transcriber could not hear you.
Yeah. So there's so many things.
Who has the ability to pause
and replay, like to write inaudible. They tried at least a dozen times to consider what that word could have been. And still, I got nothing. I'm like,
that's a big thing for me was like you had said there, which was slowing down. It's like I get very excitable on stage. I get very revved up. I get more revved up the more audience gets into it. Realize getting revved up doesn't mean I need to speed up.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that. And when I was teaching the class, that was the more nervous somebody was, the faster they talked because they wanted to get it over with.
I hear that.
They wanted to sit back down. And I'm teaching our kids that right now too, where our son Owen, he's really good at talking, but he goes fast when he gets in front of the class. So we'll time it here, and it'll be if it's a 5-minute talk, it'll be a minute faster in class. And we talked about why that is. He also says he's going to work for us when he gets older. I'm like, doing what? I don't have a job. I don't know what you're going to do, but you will always speed up. So that's why I said, when you rehearse, always understand you'll go a little faster than you would in a rehearsal or a practice. And on the flip side of that, if you are an actual speaker or going to be doing that or doing a speaking part of a meeting, never, ever, ever go over time. Ever. Yeah.
In the corporate workplace, what often happens is people can go overtime, but they often go undertime as well. And that you see somebody with a 25 or a 30-minute slot, and 7 minutes in, they're like, so I'm done. And the whole event goes,
I had a gig last year where they said, come down at, you know, the thing, right? They come down at 9:30. You're on at 10, gives you time to get mic'd up. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. So I came down at 9 instead. I think I just misread the time, and I came down at 9. And I was just listening to the guy, and at 9:20, the MC gets up and goes, Scott Stratton's the president of Unmarketing. Nobody looked if I was in the room. I was going on at 10. But somebody did exactly that. They were supposed to speak for 40 minutes, and they spoke for 10 minutes. So I look at the sound guy, and he just runs towards me with a lav, and we just kind of whoop it up my shirt, clip it on, and as he finishes the bio, I just put the pack in my back pocket of the mic, and I'm on stage. And you just, like, they would have announced me, and I would have been in my room with no pants on and just oblivious to it. And so it's so running too much under time is also obviously a big problem as well. I'm not a fan of anybody filling time, but I think that when you have an agenda, especially in a day-long conference or retreat or meeting, we need to stick to that time. Now, as you and I, both as professionals, there's a certain skill set to be able to accordion your talk, right? To be able to shorten it on the fly or lengthen it on the fly. Because I've had most places are like, you have less time than we said. But once in a while, instead of 60, you have 80. Oh, and you're going on stage now.
Yeah.
And your job is to get them back on track. You can't go to lunch early. Like, you know, the catering's not ready. The stuff isn't set up. But also falling behind. I had a gig in Portland, Oregon, where they said, I have 20 minutes. They're paying my full keynote fee for 25 minutes. I'm like, all right. Flight's there. I finally get there on the other side of the continent. They're like, okay, so you have 25 minutes, and before you, 3 people are speaking for 2 minutes each. The president, the governor of the state, and the sponsor.
I know what's happening.
None of those people have spoken for 2 minutes in their life. And I said, do I have a hard stop at 2, or do I get my whole 25 minutes? She's like, it's a hard stop at 2. We have a marching band coming in. I had 12 minutes.
Yep. Been there.
I had 12 minutes to do a keynote talk. And I told my Ritz-Carlton story. I told Joshy, and I'm like, thank you. That was it.
I had one of the same ones this year as well, where it was, we want to do this big production thing with light shows in between. And what we've got is we've got 6 of the internal people at the company, and they're going to pop up on one light and do 1 3-minute talk. And then somebody's going to pop up on the other stage and do 1 minute talk for 3 minutes, like one talk for 3 minutes. And this is going to repeat around the arena for 3-minute talks times 6. And then what you get is 12 minutes at the end of that to wrap up everything that everybody's delivered. And you can move between the stages. I got about.
I'm gonna throw up.
Yeah, but I guess that's the point, that when it's our profession, we have to make that stuff work.
Yes, 100%. And you show up, and they put a stage in the middle of because this happened. They put a stage in the middle of the conference room, and you're gonna stand up in the round like you're Def Leppard. And except the stage is 6 feet off the ground, and everybody's sitting at round tables below you. So it's like you are like kind of like the Pope crossed with Cobra Commander from G.I. Joe, and you're just dictating down to people, and you just roll with it.
Yeah.
What you want to say was, why are you being stupid? What you say is, of course.
Of course. This will be fun. I love this.
The problem is people are like, well, the problem with conferences is we got to spice it up. No, the problem with conferences a lot of times is you don't have content that is relevant, that works with the frame of reference with you, the basic adult learning principles for people. We have too many, let's say, vendor-driven talks, or we have ones that just aren't applicable, where, you know, nobody walked out of a conference and said the content was the best I've ever seen, but I wish they did it in the round. I wish they did it with spotlights going off in the corners and different.
I was missing the laser beams. It needed more lasers. Yeah.
I wish the executives did a cheesy video that only they found funny. You know, that was what I was hoping for.
Yeah, which clearly was thousands of dollars in budget, but we couldn't do coffee in the break. But we did the video.
We haggled the speaker on his fee, but we brought in a production company to film a take on the Ferris Bueller's Day Off with the executives.
Yeah, Perfect. Let's pivot in another direction. You said that you don't rehearse, you've never rehearsed, but you also said that people are comfortable when they're talking about something that they know remarkably well.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a curveball at you and say that perhaps one of the reasons you feel like you've never rehearsed is that you're actually delivering stuff that is so familiar to you and so commonplace to you that what I know about you is that you're not afraid to share an opinion in a moment if you feel you have something that would add value. And that's all that a speech is. So my guess is anything you're sharing in front of an audience, you've shared at least once before, even if in just your mind's eye.
100%. And I think one of the benefits is my rehearsal is every talk I give.
Right.
You know, when I do 60 or so a year, I've done 400 keynotes in the past 7 years. Every talk is a rehearsal for the next one. And so I slowly introduce, let's say, a new bit, and I see how it resonates. Then you work on that bit, and that's my rehearsal for it. So then you have ones that are just like polished, solid sections or bits, and you have ones I'm working on. And so I'm always doing that. And like for me too, it is different because I'm giving a keynote. I'm not giving a workshop. I'm not giving it where I've got to provide 17 steps from thing, or I got a lot of data going on the screen. The talk's my opinion, you know, and I don't need to rehearse my opinion. Now I need to maybe make it sound as good as I possibly can, and that's when each talk worked for. And I'm not, by the way, I am not advising anybody to do talks without rehearsing.
No.
I'm doing the bad parent, right? Do as I say, not as I do. Because I'm in a very fortunate position that I just took what I was yelling online and moved it on stage. I test everything. I used to test tweets to see what resonated well. I would take from Kindle, this is a great author tactic with speakers too. You go to Kindle and you can find out what people have highlighted of any book.
Yeah.
And you go, what was highlighted the most, right? And so I looked at what resonated the most in our first book and made sure to say those lines on stage. So I can wing it 100%, and I'm not remotely winging it.
No, but you just have a unique rehearsal process. I think that's what I want to try and put across is that your daily conversations, your online interactions, your written medium have become your testing place for spoken or orated words, but you've become so comfortable in the delivery of the spoken word that you have a unique rehearsal process that is different to most.
And it's different for me because speaking on stage for me is much easier than writing.
Yeah.
I find writing tedious. I find it boring. And I am lucky that my partner in my business and the co-author of the books is my wife, Alison. And so she's the writer. And so she can write, I speak, and it works so well that I don't have to do that to you. But so if people think they hate, let's say rehearsing, but they love writing, that's the reverse for me. Right. So that's how I write as I speak.
You know, when you're traveling on a plane and you're surrounded by strangers and somebody decides it's a good idea to talk to you and ask you the question, so what do you do? What is the real answer that Scott gives?
It depends on my mood. I have two answers. It's either I'm an author.
Yeah, that's the easy one.
that's just I don't want to get into
it.
You'll understand. I ask, what do you write? And I'll tell them. Yeah, author sounds fancier. When I say I'm a speaker, they're like, "Oh, you're like a motivational speaker?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, yeah. You know, luckily I wear my headphones the whole time usually, so we don't usually have too many conversations. But here's the thing about it. I'm all curmudgeoned, and every time I do have a conversation with somebody beside me, it's always fascinating. It's always great, and
it's awkward though, right? It's awkward. It's awkward to be a speaker because that's what often happens is when you say I'm a speaker or I'm involved in the speaking business, the preconception or the box is, so you're a motivational speaker, and you go, so kind of, and they say, so what, like Tony Robbins type thing, and you go
100%.
Yeah, he's a little bit beneath me, but yeah, kind of.
That's why I lead with. That's why I lead with author, and then I'll say author. My wife and I write business books, and I speak around the country about it.
And the crazy thing is like, my wife has a funny thing because people often ask, like, what do? I can be at home a lot. I travel a lot, and in her social circle, she's like, what does Phil actually do? And she struggles with the answer to the question. And she says things like, oh, he's an author. and then people feel bad for her. And she'll say, oh, he speaks, and she thinks, oh, like, isn't that cute type thing. The world doesn't have a particularly comfortable box or lens to see the speaking profession through, which I find kind of unusual versus almost every other profession.
Yeah, it's because it's considered a soft skill though too, right? There's no barrier to entry.
So there's no perceived barrier to entry. There's no perceived barrier to entry.
Yes, 100%. And that's all it is perception. Just like when I say I'm a speaker, people think Tony Robbins. They also think, well, anybody, I'm speaking right now.
Right.
Right. So I'm a speaker, right? Fishes don't say they're swimmers. You know what I mean? Like, it's just there. We can do that. So my real answer is I just try to avoid all conversations with people.
And I'm with you. Like, when I'm on the road, it's anything I can possibly do to avoid a conversation, because we are products of our product, right? But it's in our off time. It's like, people don't need to be brilliant at their day job when they're sat at home in their sweatpants. That's not where they get interrupted. But our travel time, the time you'd normally find yourself bumping into strangers, is our sweatpants time as such. And yep. The second that you have some form of open profile, but you're not really famous, but you kind of have this accessibility and then a perception attached to that, you think, well, the second I give an answer here, I'm going to be judged.
And connected, where I'm going to have to continue the conversation. And I don't want to be that old guy sitting on my front porch telling people to get off my lawn, but you're so on when you're on stage. You're so on. Look, I really believe that speaking is a performance. And to perform, for me at least, I need the time not performing.
You know this world so well, like so well. You know this world of speaking. And what is some stuff that people should know? Maybe some preconceptions that need to be debunked. What's some stuff that you wish you knew when you were started? What are some of the myths that people see that we really should try and clear up a little?
I think one of the biggest things is that it's really hard doing it on its own. That it was kind of sold to me when I started is you just do this or just do that and you can make $1 million keynote speaking in this industry. It's just be careful who's selling you the tools, and be careful who you're looking up to. And it's, there's a lot of gigs. There's a lot of gigs and places and things. The problem is you're competing against people who do it for free. And I'm talking about just conference keynotes here and too, not even about your meetings or anything else, but conferences and professional speaking in general. Like, we have different competition silos, you and I both. So there's the free speakers who are industry speakers or speaking, doing it for exposure, whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong, by the way, with any of these silos. There's people speaking for business development. So you'll speak in front of an audience for free, and in exchange, you're getting exposed to your target market. There's people who get paid less and they get exposure and they want that for their business. Then there's professionals who make money, make a living speaking. And then there's celebrities and athletes who then realize we can make a lot of good money speaking for an hour doing this. And so, I'm floating in this world, competing with all those, not just my peers. It's not just me competing for a gig against Phil. It's me competing against Phil for a gig and Damon John from Shark Tank and the last Olympic gold medal winner. And so you realize there's a lot of competition sometimes for those paid spots. And I was told, just do this. And this is what I realized. And this goes for any business, but especially speaking. There's no just. There's no just.
None.
There's not just, maybe you're not just using your hands enough. You're not just doing this. There is 100 idioms that go into a speaker being chosen. And yeah, there's core things, right? The best way to get gigs is to speak. Having a great video really helps. Having testimonials helps with social proof. But there's so many factors that involve in this world that I think that we do it a shame by saying just.
What does the future have in store for speaking?
I was asked this 15 years ago. I was asked this again 8 years ago by an industry magazine, and I still get asked this now. And I don't see a huge shift. And this is funny because one of the things I talk about is disruption. And I always say, if you don't think you're ripe for disruption, that's when you're ripe for disruption.
Yeah.
And the problem is, where can we go with our stuff? So is it the hologram, the Tupac and the Tony Robbins hologram, and where are we going to go with that? People said, look, when streaming video blew up, they're like, well, we're no longer going to hire speakers because we'll just play your YouTube video. Yeah, that's not going to happen. The only difference, and I don't see it because I have an HR background. So I remember back 20 something years ago when they said we're moving to a paperless, society. And I don't know if you've seen the paper around, but we haven't even gotten remotely close to that.
Yeah.
So if travel changes, so if people smarten up and realize they don't have to travel so much for things, that they can do so much more virtually, and I don't mean holograms, I mean this.
Yeah.
Right? That might make less meetings, but nothing beats the face-to-face. And when you have that, you have one conference a year, you still want to do it. Now, even when the recession hit, they still had conferences.
Yeah. Even more so.
Right. They just didn't make them, crazy far away maybe, or too exotic, or they were still bringing in speakers. They were still holding conferences. So I think the future is not on the actual industry part itself. I mean, I think it's the marketing of it.
Right.
Right. And you and I have talked about this a lot of how are people finding speakers? Because it used to be, I remember mailing VHS tapes in a bubble envelope with a one sheet. And I just found one of my testimonial sheets, and yesterday I was cleaning out the furnace room and I found a testimonial sheet that I printed off 4-color processed glossy, and we'd stick in a bubble mailer and send out to a committee. And now we're looking at, the trailers that you and I both have for our business. That's where I see it coming, that is a production, not just a clip.
Yeah.
And how that would work. So that's where I see it, looking at the marketing of it more than anything else.
Yeah, and I think obviously what now exists is people that book speakers now have more transparency to what exists in the world. So the days of I'll go to my bureau, my agent, and listen to the selection, there is a greater awareness and transparency of what exists in the world. So
there's much less gatekeepers for sure, right? Where here's the speakers you should pick. Where I gotta now, you can do different things with even advertising online and YouTube pre-rolls and Facebook videos. And so I think us marketing ourselves is not just speak.
Yeah, the ability to do a good job on stage is a fraction of it, right? That needs to be a given. It's the other stuff that actually goes to having a successful speaking business.
Right.
I asked you what you think is going to be different. I now want to ask you the same question slightly differently. What do you wish was different?
I love what I do. We're in one of the few jobs that gets applause.
Nice.
Really, right? I don't like being away from my family. I have a clock that ticks in my head, and it gets louder and louder every year because the kids are getting older. And so there's a famous saying in our business, which is, you don't pay me for the hour, you pay me to leave my family. And that's big for me. So I do wish we had a hologram.
Yeah.
I wish I could beam in like Tupac at Coachella and talk to you from this room, my front sitting room at home, and do that and then click off and I'm done. And I don't mind traveling. I don't mind planes. I don't mind hotels. I'm very good on my own. I can do that, but I love home. And I'm lucky that I'm away 150, 140, 150 days a year, but that means I'm home for 200 and plus. Yeah. And I'm home. I'm not doing client work. I'm not doing, I stopped consulting 6-7 years ago because of this, because I wanted to be mentally home when I was home. So that's huge. Like I'm home right now summer. So this afternoon, we're going to go downtown and walk around the lake, and their kids are home. And like, it's just like, because they're like, our kids are 12 through 21. So I'll have plenty of time to enjoy the travel, but right now I do not.
Okay. That's a fair wish. Scott, I have 3 more questions for you. First one is, if you wanted to flip the script right now and ask me a question in and around the word speaking, what might you want to ask me?
Whew. I want to know if you look the same as me and find that speaking is always a performance.
Oh, damn, without question. So it's an out and out performance, and every single one of them is different.
Yeah.
And I feel so much responsibility towards every person that is in that room and every person that was a stakeholder involved in putting me in that room, that it feels like a duty, a duty of multiple factors of, you know, I got to be on time. I got to get the message across that they want. It needs to be entertaining. It's got to be fun. It can't be too high. It can't be too low. Like the pacing and the flavor needs to be just right for this group of people. Like the same joke you could tell 4 different ways and it can land at different volumes. Like the changing dynamics of it is the toughest puzzle to crack in the world. And I think I established one of the biggest reasons that I got involved in it as a profession is that it is the stupidest business model in the world. You'd never pitch it on Shark Tank and expect anybody to be able to back it. It is not scalable. It is not saleable. Every time you have to reinvent, every time you have a new puzzle, a new challenge that is in front of you, and every time you have the responsibility and the weight of the world on your shoulders to be as good or better than the last time that you performed, it is a thrill that it fires up in me some emotions and some synapses, to quote you saying you were missing some earlier, that I don't get in any other way.
Right.
And you say that, you know, you wanted to do this from when you were 12. The second I saw somebody perform professionally in a live audience session, I was maybe 17, 18 years of age. And I saw a guy called Richard Denny perform. And he blew my mind. I later got to be able to work with him and was CEO and advisor to his company, which was a kind of cool thing at a later point in time. And then a later mentor of mine called Nigel Risner perform, etc., all in my teens. And I'm like, I want to do that. And what I saw them deliver was a performance. And the only reason I still remember the content that they shared is because they performed the content. They didn't share me the content.
Right.
Because everything that was delivered by those two individuals, I'd heard other people say before, I've heard thousands of people say since, but it was their performance of that material that means that I now attribute that lesson to that individual, even though it's been shared by thousands of people since. So, and I think that to your point on what speaking is at the level of the professional end, it's the ability to know your content so well that you can enjoy what it takes to be able to perform it.
Right.
Which is why when you look to the music industry, which is where I draw more comparisons for our industry now than anything else, and I think the music industry gives us all the clues for what our future is going to look like. Lots of people who are great at writing songs don't perform them.
Yeah.
And I was in Nashville. A buddy of mine took me to a songwriter concert. And this was the Songwriting Awards for country music in Nashville. It was a cool thing to go to. I'm a British guy, never been in a room with that many boots and cowboy hats in it before. But what happened was the songwriters would perform their songs and they were really good. And then in a number of points, the performer that then performed that song, like Garth Brooks came out at one point and took over, like took the baton from the people that wrote one of his songs and did the final third.
Right.
And it was embarrassing for the people that wrote the song, just the difference, but it was the same song and the first song was good. And it was like, that's what we do to our material. If we get it right, is that we bring that point that moves people or it creates a moment that's remarkable. So the performance is key at the top end. And I think the performance can still be key when you're a student performing to your classmates in order to be able to get the outcome that you're looking for in that is I think Maya Angelou said it best, right? Or Vin Yang in his speaker reel. I don't know who said it first, but it's, what was it that Vin said?
People remember how you made them feel, that line, yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't remember who said it first.
Shout out to my man, Vin.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, 2 more questions. If people were talking about Scott Stratten and you weren't there, but you happened to hear in on the conversation, and they used a word to describe you, what would you hope that word would be?
other than manbun.
Yeah.
Which is usually the one. You know what? It really is. It's relevant.
Okay.
That's what drives me. The fear of being irrelevant with my knowledge is what drives me to keep going. That I think that's when we start not getting booked. That what we say is not relevant to our audience. Relevance is one of the key adult learning principles. That they're sitting there and saying, "I get why I'm here. I get why he's here," and that it's not about that I'm motivating or inspirational or anything like that. But in a business sense, is relevant, and in a life sense, I think it would be loyalty. That's my world.
Okay. Well, I can see both those words being regularly used to describe you. So I think you're pretty much on point there. And that relevant point is huge too, because it's not just relevant as in the topic was relevant to us and our needs. It's relevant to the timing, relevant to the size of the room, relevant to the energy, relevant to the cultural feelings of what's happening in the world at that moment in time. It's, relevance is a moving target, isn't it? It's not something that is given or evergreen, and loyalty is a choice. Okay. Yep. Final question is, what's Scott Stratten all about? Where can people find out more about you? If they're interested in anything you've had to say today, where shall I send them?
Everything centers around the company name, Unmarketing. So you can find that on all the platforms pretty much. Tour dates are on the website there, which is all conferences. So, but that's it. And I'm all up in YouTube everywhere. A bunch of talks are there. Short hair, long hair, goatee, beard, whatever you want. And that's my world, man. I love, and then doing this, which is sitting down, hanging out.
Sweet. Or hanging out with your family, doing the cool stuff there. And to everybody listening in right now, if you haven't yet seen it, watch Scott's YouTube video where he talks about millennials. And then also watch Scott's YouTube video where he talks about, what he does with the pencil. I think that's all I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave those things out there and see if you can go looking for those two things. And when you watch one of those videos, is you're going to be questioning yourself of, am I watching a Netflix comedy special, or am I doing something that might help me in my work or my profession? But Scott, thank you for being on Words with Friends. Thank you for being an inspiration in my world and helping me raise the bar in my speaking business. And keep striving to be more and more relevant and let some of us chase you up that pole.
Thanks, man.